Do you feel like you're the Jane Jacobs of Alexandria?
I grew up here and I like the town and we have a lot of lovely people here who are really intelligent and sometimes you just do things because you think that something is wrong and needs to be righted. And so I think a lot of people that are involved in this care deeply about the community and are simply engaged in it because of that.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Jane Jacobs was famously the Greenwich Village resident in New York City in the 1950s, who, against all odds, stopped a highway from being built through her neighborhood, and wrote a book called Death and Life of American Cities, which became the Bible of new urbanism. The voice you just heard was that of Andrew Macdonald, one of the leaders of the opposition to the proposal to build a new sports and entertainment arena in his city of Alexandria in Northern Virginia. Macdonald, a former city council member himself, was thrust into a Jane Jacobs moment when one December morning, Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Capitals hockey team and the Wizards basketball team, stood beside Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to announce his intention to move his teams out of Washington, D.C. to the Potomac Yards area in Alexandria. The teams had long occupied the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C.'s Chinatown district, and Leonsis had for some time wanted a brand new facility, but found the D.C. government unresponsive to his request for financial support to build it. Virginia's Republican Governor Youngkin and Alexandria's Democratic Mayor Justin Wilson made common purpose to construct a $2 billion deal to help relocate both teams to Northern Virginia. Monumental Sports, Leonsis's company, would put in $400 million, and the remainder would be either direct public money or a bond issue from a new sports and entertainment authority to be created. Leonsis's announcement led D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser to publicly offer $500 million in incentives to renovate the existing Capital One Arena if the teams remain in the city. All of which scratched an old wound in local politics. Neighboring jurisdictions competing with each other over investments by offering public dollars for private enterprise. But Andrew Macdonald is having none of it. Stay with us. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are dirty, messy, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it. Music for this episode comes from the Fugazi-inspired Washington, D.C. garage punk band Apollo 66. Travis Hodges on guitars and vocals, Alex Morse on bass and vocals, Sean Henderson on drums, and Chris Morse on the tambourine. You can find them at apollo66rock.com. Andrew Macdonald, welcome to Our Hit Politics.
Thank you for having me.
You are part of the opposition to moving the Capitals and Wizards to Potomac Yards and building a new arena for them there. How large is your group?
I would say we're the group that's really set up to oppose it, other than the Washington, D.C. Don't Mute D.C. group, which has been the other early. But we joined forces with the National Consumer League, which is a national organization that's opposed to financing stadiums this way. We joined forces with Sports Fans, which is a group that represents fans who go to sports facilities and so on. So, I mean, I would say we have easily now a few thousand members of supporters, and I think there are a lot more. It takes time to reach out to people and have an intelligent discussion, which has been part of the problem. Is that the city is rushed to have this approved in the General Assembly, and that's another huge issue.
Substantively, what do you disagree with?
So we disagree with the fact that Alexandria is a good location to put a sports and entertainment complex. Our transportation infrastructure where it would go is not adequate. We have a small metro station that obviously isn't even big enough, to handle the crowds. We have basically one road in. We have Route 1. We have the GW Parkway, which floods often. So I think the number one concern that people expressed right off the bat was, we're deeply concerned about how all this traffic, all these 20,000 fans or more, will, affect our community, will affect our small businesses, will affect their ability of kids to get to soccer games, you name it. And there was just a real feeling, and I think we haven't, none of this has been allayed, that Potomac Yard is just a lousy place from that perspective to put a sports arena in comparison to, say, DC again.
So apart from transportation, is there anything else substantively that you disagree with?
Sure. I mean, and as we've gone through this, I think the other major concern is financing. I mean, these projects have been shown to be basically be money losers around the country. They require, or they have, used enormous public subsidies. And in this case, this would perhaps be one of the largest public subsidies on record, well over $1 billion, maybe $2 billion that would be financed through the credit of Virginia and Alexandria residents. And this money would be used to build a new stadium in Alexandria. So I think, the concern now that people have increasingly is that you're basically wasting tax dollars, as Senator Lucas from Norfolk area, who's been opposing it, at least in the Senate of Virginia, said, we shouldn't be a piggy bank for billionaires. But that's what these projects are, really. They're giving an enormous amount of public dollars to help finance a project for a very wealthy person who should be able to basically finance the things on their own.
Do you have a breakdown of how it is, more than $1 billion or $2 billion? Because I've heard different figures, so I just want to confirm what your understanding is.
Well, exactly. It's been very hard. I mean, the initial figure was, I think, 1.5 billion. And again, Mr. Leonsis would, contribute, their company would contribute, say, 400 million up front. The rest of it would be through revenue and lease bonds that would be, backstopped, if you will, by Virginia taxpayers and Alexandria taxpayers. But the numbers keep going up. And they've modified the agreement a little bit, at least in the House bill and the Virginia General Assembly, that would essentially, allocate all of the revenue from this sort of sports and entertainment district. That it would be siphoned off to pay the bond. So they're claiming that this is a safer way to do it. But we're even now talking about taking, having the players, getting their income taxes and, that are here, even if they don't live here, which of course is something that we've tried to avoid in our relationships with the district. So it's really hard to know what the final number is, and it could actually go up to well over 3 or more, 5 billion once you include all the interest payments and cost overruns and things of that nature.
So it seems like they are borrowing money and using future revenue to pay it back. Where is the public subsidy?
Well, that is a public subsidy because you're using the credit rating of both Virginia and Alexandria. These bonds have to be backed. They have to be backed by somebody. They have to be guaranteed by somebody. I mean, they're basically municipal bonds, if you will, tax-free bonds, which is
Sure.
another issue. So the problem comes in as twofold. One, you're affecting the I mean, Alexandria is a small place and it might have $500 million that it has to backstop and through credit rating. So that affects all of its other borrowing, other projects and things. So that's the initial. And then the secondary is that a lot of these projects end up costing much more than they predict. The revenues don't end up paying for the bonds, the new revenues, and you end up with a bill that taxpayers then have to cover. So, it's on both ends, if you will. Some of it might be further down the road, and maybe we won't see some of the impact until later, but that's how at least sports economists and other people look at the problem.
Your two concerns are the traffic problems that will result, the transportation issues that would come with this new arena, and the financing mechanism for it. Is there anything else?
Yes, there are actually a whole host of other issues that are sort of part of this. There's a great concern that it will push up housing prices and make Alexandria even less affordable. And we already know how unaffordable this area is for many people. So there is a concern in especially parts of Alexandria where people, don't have all the resources that will push up prices in various ways. There's a concern that it will make it much more difficult for small businesses in Alexandria to survive and function through either traffic problems or just drawing, people to this new area. For instance, the Sierra Club has come out against this project, and they are concerned that, I mean, they basically say it's a heck of a lot smarter to renovate the existing facilities in DC from an environmental point of view. They're concerned about traffic, more people driving. I mean, this whole project is premised on the idea that somehow the metro will take up all the slack and people won't drive so much. There's not the amount of parking that's being proposed for it is totally inadequate for the potential, usage.
But if they're limiting parking, right?
Yep.
People are not going to drive.
But I mean, they won't. I mean, they won't come to the games then, and then in which case the revenue won't be there. I mean, this is the problem: is that all the studies sort of want it both ways. They want, yes, we want less traffic, less impact, but we need to have this stadium, and we need to have the use of these facilities well over 200 days a year, if not more. And so, and the metro simply isn't going to be able to handle all of
But
that
why do
traffic.
you say that? What is the basis for saying that the metro can't
The
handle?
studies, I mean, the actual studies that have been commissioned by the state have shown that the metro won't be able to handle it all, and that there'll be huge traffic jams. I mean, in queues in the thing. It's basically, I mean, you compare it to DC where you have all of these different stations where people can come in and access and roads. So I think that's a huge concern, and it hasn't been analyzed maybe as carefully as it should be yet. But I think that is the general. I mean, just limiting parking doesn't stop people from driving. I mean, they will come and try to park somewhere, and you see that in the comments being made by the city and others. Well, maybe we could park over at the airport, or maybe we could have boats bringing people in, or this and that and the other. So even they recognize that there's going to be huge, traffic related issues, and they don't have solutions for them. Have lobbyists down in Richmond. We went down about last week in a bus. We went down with the Taxpayer Alliance is another group that's working with us. So we took a bus down to Richmond and we lobbied legislators. And I think we've been pretty successful. Even though we lost in the House bill passed. 40 members of the House voted against it. So it passed 59 to 40, but we considered that um, a real victory for the effort that we've put in.
Who is the majority in the Virginia House?
It's about a slight majority as Democrats in both houses. And unfortunately, they've been the ones that have been supporting this in part because our local city council and our mayor, Justin Wilson, believe it's a good thing. I mean, so they've been pushing our local delegation to support it. But most of them voted against it in the House, or at least the delegates did.
Even though you have 3,000 signatures, could the mayor claim that he represents the majority?
Well, of course, and of course he claims that. I mean, that is the dictators claim that too, don't they? I mean, it's
But he's elected.
he's elected for sure, and
He's not a dictator.
but when you have a project, this is not am I going to put a swimming pool in your backyard or add an addition? You know what I mean? It's not even like we just had a zoning issue that had an awful lot of conflict. This is and had more public hearings than this one has. This is a multi-billion-dollar project that there's 40 years of debt payments. So this is not some simple, this requires real good public discourse, and that's what we're not having.
Okay. It's 40 years of debt payment, but it's tied to the revenues. If they had an agreement where it would continue to be tied to revenues, and that Monumental will thereafter be responsible for meeting any shortfall, would you be satisfied with that?
No, because we just think this project is not good for Alexandria. So we think it's just a lousy development project. The area that's being developed was moving in a different direction, and we think it should move in a different direction than this. And we think the community should be intimately involved in that decision making.
Now, Amazon moved into Crystal City, who is your neighbor.
Right.
Did you oppose that?
No, I didn't oppose that. I mean, obviously, we did oppose the location of the metro station because it was in wetlands or affected wetlands along the parkway. So we did oppose the location of the metro, but we didn't oppose metro. No, I mean, that was a different group.
Is that what you mean by the direction that Potomac Yards, where the arena is proposed to be put, was going? I mean, it's okay to have Amazon, but it's not okay to have the arena.
It has a lot of residential. It was supposed to be residential and mixed use. It has a Target, which is one of the it's the most, money earning Targets in the country, I think. It's a huge cash cow for Alexandria. But there was a sense that it was going to be more of a mix of residential and mixed use commercial. And obviously office stuff is, not doing very well. And of course, now we also added in the Virginia Tech site. And I don't think anybody asked Virginia Tech whether they thought having a sports arena right next to them was. But anyway, so I think it's I just think that this project just doesn't fit. And for a whole host of reasons we've discussed partially. And that we need to look for a different economic model. And this is the other point, I guess one could argue on the economics. Nobody has bothered really to compare the economics of this project with, say, another approach.
By another approach, do you mean keep the teams in DC? Is that what
you're saying? Keep the teams and develop Potomac Yards differently, where we would get for instance, we would have, it's estimated something like $400 million of tax revenue, property tax revenue, that we would be getting if we had a different stream of development.
What is a different stream of development?
I mean, again, I know something about the history of this, of course, and I mean again, what that development looks like obviously is complicated because market forces do change, and you have to work with what you have. But the problem here is that this project was just dumped on the citizens of Alexandria. It sort of bypassed the planning process that had been established, for one, and basically said, look, we can't do that. This is what we've got to do in order to make money here. The
state does get to preempt.
Well, what do you mean? Not local. I mean, they can't preempt local. I mean, we have the right to plan and zone. I mean, there's no they don't have the ability.
Land use ultimately is a state power delegated to localities.
Right. And so we have the power. I mean, Alexandria, I should say, has the power to turn this project down, even if the General Assembly created this sports authority, which could issue bonds. We could turn the project down. The problem is the local government has basically said, "Hey, we think this is great," and they're moving forward as if we've all agreed to it.
When is the next election for local elections?
Well, there's a primary in June, I guess it is now, and then we have a we'll have the national election, I guess, in the fall. It used to be a May election, and now it's all tied. So one of the questions that people have raised is if we can't defeat this bill in the General Assembly, um, and we don't feel that our local government is representing us very well, could we have a referendum, for instance, and as they do with casinos and so
That's
on?
right.
So that's a possibility. And many of these projects around the country, the ones that have been defeated through referendum.
Alexandria Mayor Justin Wilson and Governor Youngkin are both not running again. Do you think that's part of the deal? That's why he's able to do this?
I don't know about that. I don't have any evidence of that per se. I think he maybe just wants to go do something else. Maybe he wants to run for a higher office. I don't know. But of course, there are people that are running for his position that are on the city council who, some might oppose it, and some, it's unclear. So it's
So it is unclear what kind of support is on the city council for this project?
so far it's been mostly pro. I would say it's been, for instance, I was down in Richmond last Friday speaking in the House. The Virginia Assembly is an interesting place because you basically have very little time for any public comment. Lobbyists get a lot of time, but so we had 5 minutes to speak, and I spoke against it. And who spoke for it? Well, Monumental, of course, and two of my former colleagues on the city council.
How big is your city council?
What is it? Seven, I guess, right?
So
Yeah.
2 out of 7. I mean, what about the other 5? What is your take on them?
Well, the mayor is basically runs a pretty tight ship here, and most of them seem to be following his lead.
So it's actually unanimous in the city council right now. So
Well, there are questions about labor agreements. There's a questions about whether unions would be, would there be an agreement that would make it so that only unions could do the work? And they have raised certain concerns that might, affect their decision, but overall, they haven't really questioned the economics of it. They basically believe that this will generate all this wonderful new revenue and that will be good for Alexandria.
okay, let's talk about the transportation question. We haven't delved into it. What is your estimate of how bad it's going to be, and why is it that new infrastructure cannot be built as part of the project to accommodate that?
Sure, it's a good question. The first answer is that the studies haven't been done. The study that has been done is basically according to the former, and this is speaking from the former general manager of our local transportation system, Dash. She called it a joke. So they basically haven't looked at many of the key issues in any.
What would you like them to look at? What key issues would you like them to tell you
Well,
about?
I think we would like to see the full reports. They don't even issue the full reports. They just give us sort of summary, cartoonish statements saying, well, we can change some traffic lights here. We can, we know there's problems with Metro, but, we can, basically, we'd like to see the data. We'd like to have the ability to interact in that process. Um, all the studies, economic studies, traffic studies have all been done by the supporters of this project. Some of them are just basically PR studies. They're not really, good independent studies. So everybody's left feeling like, okay, they're not really analyzing the information carefully.
Andrew, what would you say to somebody who said that this opposition that you have is akin to being a NIMBY, which is not in my backyard? So, you talk about transportation, very classic NIMBY issue. You talk about crime, you talk about, environmental issues, and the idea that somehow altering what exists right now is not good for the community. What would you say to them?
I'd say it's not good for the community. I'd say that the data that Monumental and others have provided doesn't justify their claims. They're basically, or it's I mean, NIMBY, I never quite know what to say to that. I mean, as an environmentalist person as I am, I'm a geologist by training. Um, I mean, recently we had a zoning issue, and the people that were for the zoning for housing were called YIMBYs. I mean, so it's like we had this debate. But the real point I think I want to make is that it's not about we're not just reacting because we don't want something new, we don't want Potomac Yard or Alexandria to thrive, or we think the city, will never change. We really think this project is bad for the city, and that the public deserves to have all the facts and be able to review it carefully before decisions are being made. And this is the opposite of what is happening. So I don't see it as a NIMBY issue per se, whatever that precisely means, but I see it as a real attempt to try to hold the powers that be to some standard, some democratic process, and to good factual analysis.
Do you feel like you're the Jane Jacobs of Alexandria?
No, I don't. I mean, I've gotten involved in too many projects, but I grew up here and I like the town, and we have a lot of lovely people here who are really intelligent, and so it's sometimes you just do things because you think something is wrong and needs to be righted. And so I think a lot of people that are involved in this, care deeply about the community and are simply engaged in it because of that.
How can you really stop this? Realistically.
Realistically, I mean, of course, if you look at, the money and the power and the all of the forces. I grassroots efforts are pretty amazing, and I think we can stop it, and I think probably will. And I think the reasons we'll stop it is because the claims that are being made about the benefits are very weak and not substantiated. And I think that the public, the pressure that's coming from the public now, and eventually, is making its way through the media and through into the politicians is having an impact. Yes, it's possible still that there will be horse trading in Richmond, and people that want things will get them from the governor. And I mean, this is a very strange issue in the sense because you have a Republican governor who's offering all of these things to Democrats in exchange, more or less, shall we say, for voting for this project. So he's putting everything on the line to try to get this deal.
Right. So it does look like a bipartisan effort.
Well, I mean, the Republicans are supporting Youngkin to some degree, but a number of Republicans voted against the House bill. So I wouldn't say this is a done deal at all. I would say that the pressure is growing, and that there's a very good chance that this project will be stopped one way or another. Maybe outright, or maybe through a referendum. I'm not sure yet.
What is the timeline for a referendum if you need to get one ready?
The General Assembly is very short period of time, and so now they're moving into the budget session, and you have the chair of the Senate, Senator Lucas from Norfolk area, has refused to take up the bill. She said very strongly yesterday, we shouldn't be a piggy
that she has
a piggy bank for billionaires. And so it's unclear how the bills are going to be attached to the budget, and at what stage one could add an amendment. For instance, they've added one amendment you probably know about to say that the whole bill would have to be reenacted in a year from now. In other words, so they've whatever that. I don't think that is necessarily good. I mean, just because the local government, I'm sure, will continue to try to push forward. So it's unclear how a referendum, for instance, would be added if it wasn't defeated.
But if you are sure that the local government will continue to push for it, and the local government is going to be reelected this year, then that means that there is significant public opinion in support of the project.
Oh, we haven't had the election yet. So I think we need to reserve judgment, and there are some new people running. And I think, politicians are very good at changing course. I tried not to, but if there's enough public pressure, they may change their take on this. So I don't think this decision is written yet.
That's correct. I don't think it is either. But threshold arguments are really hard to make, right? Enough pressure. Usually politics is also about, sort of meeting in the middle if it's possible.
The middle would be a referendum. The middle would be give the voters of Alexandria a choice to decide. That to me would be the middle, if there is a middle. Because that goes to the heart of the issue, where in an issue like this, it should receive really an overwhelming public support. It's too big a project. Has too many impacts, we believe. So if there's a compromise, that's it.
Andrew Macdonald, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with the wrap-up and lessons from my conversation with Andrew Macdonald, the former Alexandria City Council member who is fighting to keep the Capitals and Wizards hockey and basketball teams out of his town. In her fight to stop the highway from tearing through Greenwich Village in the 1950s, Jane Jacobs found powerful allies, including Eleanor Roosevelt. Andrew Macdonald has Louis Lucas, the powerful Virginia State Senate finance chair, who said this after Youngkin and Leonsis announced the arena plans. Anyone who thinks I'm going to approve an arena in Northern Virginia using state tax dollars before we deliver on toll relief and for public schools in Hampton Roads, where she is from, must think I have dumbass written on my forehead. Lucas has refused to schedule bills related to the project and removed from the state budget text that would allow the project to move forward. As we close out the episode, it seems Youngkin has offered $322 million in tunnel toll relief for Hampton Roads, tying it to future revenues from the proposed arena. No news on whether Lucas will accept the deal. If she does, Macdonald still has the referendum option. In part-time state legislatures, timing and sequencing are very important. A referendum plan has to come real soon, if at all. I said in my intro that the project scratches an old wound in local politics. Neighboring jurisdictions competing tooth and nail for investments, especially marquee sports teams. We saw this just before the pandemic with Amazon's search for a location for its second headquarters. Amazon chose Crystal City, abutting Potomac Yards, where the sports arena is planned, dashing the hopes of Montgomery County and Maryland. A few months ago, when the U.S. government announced that it would build the new FBI headquarters in Greenbelt in Maryland, Virginia elected officials were up in arms about that decision and called the process unfair. More recently, the U.S. House of Representatives voted in favor of a District of Columbia plan for redeveloping the old RFK Stadium, which is step one to bringing back the Washington football team, now called the Commanders, back into the district. Not surprisingly, Maryland's entire Democratic congressional delegation did not support the bill because it would help the Commanders move out of suburban Maryland. The bill passed with a big majority. Most other Democrats in the House voted for it. The protests by the Maryland delegation achieved nothing. But the fact that they felt it necessary to engage in protest symbolism illustrates the competitive pressures states and jurisdictions feel when it comes to attracting economic opportunity. The capitals and the wizards have undoubtedly been an engine of economic growth in Chinatown in DC. When the arena was first built in DC, the Chinatown neighborhood was run down and in need of development. Potomac Yards is different. Neighboring Crystal City and Alexandria are already pretty well developed. And if the Caps and the Wizards moved out of DC, the Chinatown area will see considerable economic loss. This raises the question about whether neighboring jurisdictions should compete rather than coordinate their pursuit of economic development. That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, and assistant producers Daniel Gallio and Katarina Gasek, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from the Fugazi-inspired Washington, D.C. garage punk band Apollo 66. Travis Hodges on guitars and vocal, Alex Morse on bass and vocals, Sean Henderson on drums, and Chris Morse on the tambourine. You can find them at apollo66rock.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you will subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. Don't forget to tune in to I Hate the News on Tuesday morning.